This shocking recession indicator shows how bad it's about to get. Right now, the yield curve is completely inverted in Canada. And it's not just the yield curve that is screaming recession at us. Another indicator that I came across that shows the cyclical nature of the economy in Canada is also showing recession. So what I'm showing you on the screen right now is basically the net migration of people coming into Alberta. And you can see that the net migration is very boom and bust. It goes from boom to bust to boom to bust. And the thing is with that is we have seen another spike in net migration, which is typical right before a recession. This is typically something that happens here in Alberta, and it's actually a good indicator to look at and say, hey, there's a recession coming. The thing is, when you go back through history and look at the other times when the net migration has spiked into Alberta, you'll notice it is right before a recession, and then it drops and almost goes negative in some cases. And what is also to note is the more extreme that spike upwards is, the more extreme the recession actually is. So it's kind of crazy when you think about this as being a recession indicator, but as we know, psychology plays a huge factor in what happens in the real economy. And what we've seen during boom bust cycles is housing prices have risen in areas, and particularly it hasn't really affected Alberta so much because Alberta builds a lot of homes compared to other provinces. So if you're purely just looking at buying a house and house prices just go so high that you're never going to be able to afford one, you of course then might think, okay, let's consider moving somewhere else, and then you think Alberta is the place. And this typically has happened and seems to be a pattern that has played out time and time again. The thing is, this creates huge economic distortions in Alberta as well. It also creates massive distortions in the housing market in Alberta because you have all these people moving who are essentially weak hands who then go and buy a property, and then guess what? They lose their job, and then they have to move back, and they're either renting out that property or selling it or going into foreclosure, and that creates like this boom bust cycle that also happens in the housing market. And a lot of people actually relate the housing market to oil prices, but there's really not a strong correlation with the housing market and oil prices. That's been debunked by my friend Hilliard, who I have actually interviewed on this channel before. You should check out some of the prior videos. But the thing is, it's very, very interesting to look at this sort of stuff because it kind of shows you the crazy mentality that gets inflicted into the economy during these times of where asset bubbles are just rising and rising and rising, and people are getting more and more fearful about what might happen in the future, that they'll never be able to afford a home, they'll never be able to make enough money, it's just never going to be a good thing. So they start to look at other places and they start to think, well, we could go there and we'll be able to buy that home. It seems like it makes sense to me that this psychology would come every time there's a bubble cycle, because it makes sense that those people would look towards places that actually are lower values for houses, and that's exactly what's happened. Nova Scotia and Alberta have been places that have benefited off these people moving. And it's not just a phenomenon that happens in Canada. If you also look at the United States, you saw the exact same things happen. Maybe not moving to a place which is as cold as Calgary, but you saw people move to Florida. You saw people also move to Texas from California. You saw people moving to Arizona. People move into these lower cost states that tend to build more homes, have a more affordable cost of living. Those are where those people tended to gravitate towards. Now, it is very, very interesting that you see these patterns play out across different countries, and that really means something because you can tell it's more a pattern of human behavior than it is based off any location. And what a lot of people don't understand is that the economy was extremely extremely distorted by government stimulus during 2020 and 2021 in Alberta. Alberta, if you can remember, had one of the highest unemployment rates in Canada. It was one of the biggest recipients of government stimulus, and that means the economy got the most distorted. It meant there was the most employers that were taking the Canada wage subsidy, the most recipients of the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. And the thing is, with all that stimulus money, that creates huge distortions. For example, let's use a restaurant that gets a wage subsidy. Well, that restaurant would have gone bankrupt without the wage subsidy, so they get that wage subsidy and then they're able to employ those servers again, and they can employ and take on the staff. So they hire all these people back, but then when the government stimulus disappears and the recession hits and people don't want to spend that money again, guess what happens? Those jobs just disappear. They're gone. And all those people who moved and took those jobs that were there are now gone as well, because they are the high-risk people that have moved. I mean, you and I think this way, but banks really don't think this way. They really don't evaluate the risk too well anymore. They use broken models and they just don't care. They just want to lend you that money and make the money that they can off that by selling it and packaging it to some other investor. So the thing is, the bank doesn't really care. So they're just willing to loan to anybody with a pulse during 2021, especially because the Bank of Canada was buying mortgages actively during 2020. So that creates this artificial environment where people can just move and they are not secure in that place. They've only been here like 3-6 months. They could get fired for absolutely no reason at any time very easily, and they can go out and get a mortgage. And it looks like they are very, very safe people to lend the money to from the bank's perspective, because they don't really take these things into account so much. And as we've seen in the prior videos that I've done on the fraud, it's not often that they really double check on things either. So the thing is, then that creates a distortion in the housing market. So you've got distortions in the economy because of the stimulus, and then you've got distortions in the housing market. Do you see how the people that got the jobs because of the stimulus, they now go into the housing market because they got FOMO as their primary reason for moving to a province like this was to buy a home. So of course they're obsessed with getting that done as soon as possible. And then essentially, again, you end up with a distorted housing market. And we've seen these constant boom bust cycles in the housing market within Calgary and Edmonton and Alberta in general. And it's not just in Alberta that we've seen these boom and bust cycles. We've also seen these boom and bust cycles in Phoenix, Arizona, and in other cities in Texas. And we've actually been through Phoenix, Arizona many, many times. You see these patterns just repeat over and over again. You would think people would see them coming, but they tend not to see them coming. And I don't know if there's anything we can really do about that apart from sit on the sidelines and just watch it all unfold. The thing is, for people that want to buy, there will be opportunities at some point, providing that you have the capital, because banks are going to be wanting bigger down payments in the future because of massive risk when everything starts to go wrong and everybody starts defaulting on their payments, which is gonna happen. It's inevitable right now. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, you might like this one there. You might also like this one there. And also consider joining my free email list. There's a link in the description and also in the pinned comment. I won't spam you, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.